Hello, and welcome back to season 3 of Black Music Footprints. My name is Mondre Moffett, and I'm just so excited to be your host for this third season again. Wow, we have had a fantastic season 1 and season 2, very prolific, a large body of work in both seasons. Well, season 1, we gave you some. We checked out the musical giants, those musical griots in our culture that leads the way with their vision and teach us to the way to go by illuminating our pathway. We had that in season 1, and season 2 was no exception. We gave we let it do what it do in season 2, and now in season 3, we will spill the tea. So buckle up and stay tuned. Uh, we have some things happening in season 3 that will blow your mind. When you talk about the musical giants that illuminate our pathway to artistic expressions, it's akin to the griot in our culture. You know, the griot, the storyteller in African American culture, the griot, the visionary, the musical giant. And those are the people, the men and women that we follow and teach us how to achieve a level of excellence. So before we go into season 3 and totally spill the tea, we want to take a look at what happened in season 1. It was a very prolific time. We gave you some in season 1. So I want to be able to share with you and go down the pathway of what happened in season 1. Now, for those of you who had missed it, I think, first of all, the apex for me in season 1 was what I call the shift from New Orleans style jazz to Chicago style jazz. It was during the classic jazz era, and we had none other than the great Louis Armstrong. You see, in the 1920s and 1930s, that was called the classic jazz era part 2, music in the Chicago movement, Chicago style jazz. And we were introduced to the greatness of Louis Armstrong. He played 12 seconds of music that musicologists say was the greatest 12 seconds in all of American music in his West End blues. But during this time, it was a very prolific time, a time of somewhat of a bombshell in African American music, because you not only had Louis Armstrong, you had Bessie Smith, you had Ma Rainey, you had Thomas Dorsey in gospel. That was so many African American giants, so many griots in that time period that it was just bananas. And also emerging in that time period, we had an episode that we dealt with swing. Don't forget, there's Duke Ellington, the Duke, that was happening all along in New York City. Let's take a listen to a little bit what Duke Ellington was talking about. He was talking about, let's get on the A train and go up to Harlem. You must take the A train. Of course, that's the great Ella Fitzgerald. Duke and Ella hanging out together on the train, take the A train. You know, during this particular period, you hear a lot of sounds in black music dealt with the train. You know, you heard this similar to what you heard in the Negro spirituals, you know, taking the train to freedom. And Duke Ellington said, there's two kinds of music. This is what I love about Duke. He said there was two kinds of music, good and bad. my mentor, Mr. Duke himself, Duke Ellington. And we must not forget, when everybody was taking the train and moving up north to New York City to Harlem, this gentleman was already there. He was the hip, cool cat. Let me find him. None other than Mr. Fats Waller. Oh, yeah. I can get all in my feelings listening to great Fats Waller. Now, Fats was called Fats not because of his body size, his heavy boneness, as you would say, but Fats because he emulated and walked in the footsteps of the great Fats Waller. That's where he got his name from, not from his build. The great Fats Waller, the hip, cool cat that was already in New York when everybody arrived, showing them the way, Fats Waller. And, oh, it was just a prolific season. We're still in season 1. We had Songs of Freedom. And we witnessed the African-American classical artists in Louisville, homegrown Louisville native, Mr. Todd Duncan. In 1935, the first African-American on Broadway to perform Porgy and Bess, Black classical. Here we're talking about the great Todd Duncan, a lyric tenor, graduate of Simmons College in Louisville, Kentucky, in New York City, 1935, the premiere of Gershwin's Porgy and Bess. He invented the role Porgy, that role Porgy and Bess. And so, hey, talking about diverse performance traditions, we went from Black classical to ragtime to the classic jazz era, Chicago style jazz, and we are not done. It was a very prolific time, but what really struck me, not to mention the Duke Ellington's, the jazz orchestra of the Ellingtons and all of his proteges, all at the same time period. And did I mention Louis Armstrong? Yes, I did. Pops, as they call him. But the thing during this time period that struck me the most was the great Billie Holiday, her social and political commentary, her critique of what was happening in society at that time during the Jim Crow, A Strange Fruit.
Southern trees bear strange fruit, blood on the leaves and blood at the root, black bodies swinging in the southern breeze, strange fruit hanging among the poplar trees. Pastoral scene of the gallant South, the bulging eyes and the twisted mouth, scent of magnolia, sweet and fresh. Then the sudden smell of burning flesh. Here is a fruit for the crows to pluck, for the rain to gather.
Wow, how hunting and how insightful and how transformative and how much courage, very courageous, and leadership, and the height of being a griot. This Billie Holiday, you know, it was the United States against Billie Holiday, you know, doing all that they can to suppress her, but she wouldn't be quiet. She spoke out. In all of her humility, she still spoke out. The great Billie Holiday, Strange Fruit. And must not forget the piece that was probably her most famous piece, God Bless the Child. So you can see the time we had in season one, I am just beside myself, all of the things that happened in season one. And still, one of the apex of season one was what I call the episode we had on the bombshell of the 1940s, the bombshell in black music of the 1940s, the explosion. Simultaneously, you had in 1940, you had the golden age of gospel music, 1940s. You had the emergence of rhythm and blues, 1940. And you had bebop, a jazz style that revolutionized black music and changed the whole concept of jazz to what we now refer to as jazz as America's classical music, created by African Americans. The bombshell of the 1940s was like nothing that we had seen before. Of course, we had great things in the 1920s, as I explained. That was a little prelude. But the 1940s, and when we come back, I will play for you some excerpts from that bombshell. Stay tuned. Black Music Footprints. Yes, indeed. Welcome back. My name is Mondre Moffett. I'm your host, back with Black Music Footprints. I was just talking about this bombshell, this explosion in black music. Why is a bombshell? We have so many different styles and performance traditions in black music emerging at one time in the same place at the same time. That's a bombshell for you. And the first thing that happened was this rhythm and blues, led by none other than the great Louis Jordan. Take a listen.
Heading for the station with a pack on my back. I'm tired of transportation in the back of a hack. I love to hear the rhythm of the clickety-clack and hear the lonesome whistle, see the smoke from the stack. And pal around with Democratic fellas named Mac. So take me right back to the track, Jack. Choo-choo, choo-choo, choo-boogie, woo-woo, woo-woo, choo-boogie, choo-choo, choo-choo, choo-boogie. Take me right back to the track, Jack. You reach your destination, but alas and alack, you need some compensation to get back in the black. You take a morning paper from the top of the stack and read the situations from the front to the back. The only job that's open needs a man with a knack, so put it right back in the rack, Jack. Choo-choo, choo-choo, choo-boogie, woo-woo, woo-woo, choo-boogie, choo-choo, choo-choo, choo-boogie. Take me right back to the track, Jack.
All right. Then the golden age of gospel music with the great Thomas Dorsey, Take My Hand, Precious Lord, Sam Cooke, and many, many others, the Caravans, Sally Martin. But that gospel music, and I said I was going to spill the tea a little bit about season 3. We have more to come, but here's a little snippet of this tea I'm going to be spilling a little later, just a little tease.
God, we give you glory. We give you honor. And all of the praise belongs to you. We want you to sing this all over the world. Yeah. Here we go. I give you glory.
Now, that wasn't in the bombshell of the 1940s, but the evolution of what happened with those Precious Lord, the tradition of the solo tradition in gospel music, the quartet tradition in gospel music, so diverse. And then you had the choir tradition in gospel music, something that's similar to what we were about to jump on, that has manifested itself here in the 21st century, a bombshell. But what we did have is those beboppers, 1940s, Charlie Parker, Max Roach, and the great Dizzy Gillespie leading the way in the bebop movement. Oh, that's Charlie Parker telling this story. You know, when I was coming up and trying to learn and listen to those musical giants whose footsteps I follow, those great griots such as a Charlie Parker or Miles Davis or Dizzy Gillespie and the many, many more that surrounds our culture, they used to tell me, blow your horn, tell your story. That was the best advice I would receive. In fact, in many cases, that was the only advice. Blow your horn and tell your story. And if you can really hear in the saxophone work of Charlie Parker, such an excellent expert at what he does, blowing his horn and simply telling his story. And so this is an incredible bombshell in the 1940s. But we were not done yet in season 1. We had a celebration of the jazz quintet with Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers with their pieces, the quintet of 5 musicians, the first time for that to emerge with the tenor saxophone, this alto saxophone with Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. So not only did we have this bebop, but they also brought about the jazz quintet. We had the alto saxophone, the trumpet, bass drums, and piano, the emergence in the 1940s, this bombshell, the jazz quintet. And we moved on to season 2, and we allowed season 2 to do what it do, right? Season 2. We opened up with season 2 with an incredible rendition of, not that one, but an incredible rendition of You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog. The theme of the episode was entitled The Appropriation of Black Music. And when did rock music become white? Was the prevailing question. Because rock music is very much a part of what we heard with Sister Arizona Drains on guitar. Here we go with Big Mama Thornton.
Well, I feel alright this morning now. I want everybody to know that I was the one to say, you ain't nothing but a hound dog, when snooping around my door. You ain't nothing but a hound dog, when snooping around my door. You can wag your tail, but I ain't gonna feed you no more. You told me you were high class, but I can see through that. Yes, you told me you were high class, but I can see through that. And Daddy, I know you ain't no real cool cat.
Now, some of you may think Elvis Presley wrote You Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog. That's Big Mama Thornton's music. Of course, Elvis made millions of dollars on it, black appropriation of black music, or the white appropriation of black music. We still have that today. We had it back in the 1800s with minstrelsy, black minstrelsy. So, I mean, it's black culture that we have to understand. And not only Big Mama Thornton, Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog, you have to look at the Tutti Fruttis with Little Richard, all of the other great music that came in the 50s that was misappropriated. And many, many black artists did not get their due. Not only did not receive their due, but did not get their compensation for their great hits. The Chuck Berrys. What about this one? Oh, that's Johnny B. Good. Of course, Johnny B. Good is Chuck Berry. That's his alter ego. And you had every rock artist in Europe, European rock artist playing his music and making millions of dollars on it. The great Chuck Berry, the father of rock and roll, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking about black music and the misappropriation of black music. We dealt with that in season 2. That's what I mean by letting it do what it do. We have a rich tradition. And that was not all. What else did I have? The Tale of Two Cities, cool jazz. I call that episode The Tale of Two Cities. Why? Because on the East Coast, you had Miles Davis and Dale Evans and some of the musicians playing cool jazz, invented it. It was a black art form. But on the West Coast, you had European musicians playing what they call cool jazz. And there you had The Tale of Two Cities. Again, in the 50s. And what resulted, however, was Miles Davis's Kind of Blue album, the greatest selling jazz album in history. But It came out of this tale of two cities in the 1960s. And the highlight of season two was another bombshell of the 1960s. You know, the 1960s was a turbulent time. You had the assassination of Dr. King, you had the assassination of Malcolm X, Kennedy, the burning of Newark, New Jersey, and many, many cities. And black music went to another level. You had the emergence of avant-garde music to express this dis-ease with what was happening. You had Ornette Coleman, John Coltrane's A Love Supreme. That was Ornette Coleman's first take. Yes, that disease going on. But then you also had a reassessment of our identity with Mr. James Brown. Say it loud, I am black and I'm proud. What an identity. And then the great Donny Hathaway with Someday We'll All Be Free. And of course, we had much, much more. Everything culminated in the jazz singers, the jazz singer, the divas of jazz, Miss Nancy Wilson, Miss Sarah Vaughan, and Miss Ella Fitzgerald. The great Diana Washington. And the great Nancy Wilson. Thank you very much for joining us here on SSC Live TV, where truth, justice, and power always prevail.
Why I'm so in love with you. No one else